Good morning, this is Jeff with Sewer Tech Northwest. Today we're at 267 Southeast 33rd Avenue here in Portland. Located in the basement. Someone's been nice enough to pull the toilet here for us. Going down through a toilet flange, 4-inch cast iron is the diameter. We're going to check the overall condition, serviceability of the sanitary sewer line. Water's running. We are zeroed out just inside the flange here. Hit a Y connection right out of the gate. Let's hope and pray we don't have too many more of those down line here. Those things can be at another turn here. These can be the pinch point on these older houses, especially larger houses like this. They don't have a nice straightforward configuration. Anyway, thus far we've gone through a couple spots there with some minor standing water. Ooh boy, another one, another turn. And I don't have my auto leveling camera today, I'm sorry. It's in repairs. You're going to have some video here that's upside down. Of course, my fancy new wireless system does not allow for me to flip the image over like my old stuff does. And what we just put underneath right there, that would appear to be, I'll try and locate that at the end. I've got some time. That right there looks like the clean out access, which at this point, it looks like it's probably buried underneath flooring or something like that. The only other possibility is it could potentially be a storm system connection, which is very, very common on old homes to have. All right, we're out. We should be outside the house here now as the line is transitioning from cast iron over to clay pipe. 6-inch clay. So right here, right now my camera is upside down. Just up ahead there, you have a tie-in coming in. We'll get a better view of that on the way out when the line is fully drained. It looks like a small diameter tie-in, like a 3 or 4 inch. The significance of that, I've been doing this 13 years. I have cameraed thousands of party lines at this point. It's all I did for the first 4 or 5 years of scoping lines. I don't know if I've ever seen a party line connection in Portland that is not a full diameter 6-inch Y connection. It'll be the full diameter of the line. Storm system connections, however, are very rarely 6-inch diameter. They're almost always 4-inch or 3-inch. So when you get a tiny tie-in like that, especially relatively close in to the home, it's very indicative of a storm system tie-in. So the that Y connection I talked about being the clean out back in the cast iron most likely is indeed a clean out, and the one in the clay there looks far more like a storm system. Got some kind of wonky pipe joints here in the clay pipe. We've gone past a myriad of root intrusions. That joint right there is fractured. It's busted wide open to the ground. And then we should be nearing the main. That's the main connection right there. I apologize for the camera being upside down for a lot of this. My eyeballs and brain flip this thing over in my head, no problem. I realize that's kind of weird for the average person to look at, though. There you go. That's a little better shot. So 104 feet to the main. The plus side of this line is it actually has pretty darn good slope and grade still. We're going to get a better view of all that once the line drains out here in a moment. And the significance of that, if the line still has good enough slope and grade, you can potentially do a trenchless epoxy liner to update the clay pipe. All right, it's just located the camera head there. I apologize, I completely forgot to check the street name to verify it, but it's going out. You've got the road that the driveway attaches to. That's usually how I'm kind of facing a house as far as orienting and describing things. The line is going out. If you're standing in the street staring at the garage, the line is shooting out the right side, which I believe is actually the front door of the home. I'll have to go back out there and check that. My locates out there are coming in really, really wonky for some reason. I was getting depths jumping around between 3 and 11 feet. So I'm not sure if there's something interfering with my locator, but it's pretty wacky. So the markings out there on the road, I did put a green T marking down to indicate where the approximate location of where the line connects to the main. But it's to be taken with a little bit of a grain of salt there. If I can't get nice accurate depths the exact pinpoint location over that spot sometimes can be thrown off too. Anyway, you've got a myriad of bad pipe joints in the clay pipe here. I mean, you can all see that. There's separations, busted joints, root intrusions. So the line is ready for update, and this is one that as we pull back here, as long as the line drains off, you have the makings of an epoxy liner setup, which is what I would highly recommend looking into on this line. It would save, I think, a humongous amount of money and tearing up landscaping and everything else under the sun. The other thing, as it sits from a functional standpoint, flow-wise, unless you abuse this sewer line, this thing is not at a point right now where it's just going to back up on you. However, the thing you have to be really concerned about, and this line is showing evidence of settling already with the wonky pipe joints, where they're becoming juxtaposed, offset, things like that, is that these joints are open at the ground and they start sucking dirt and groundwater through them, which leads to progressive settling. And once a line settles too badly, to where you have bellies and significant offset joints, things like that, you lose the ability to do a liner on it. So it behooves you to get on top of these things, especially when you look at, there's a lot of times these liners are saving you. I mean, they're 2 to 3, 4 times cheaper sometimes than your traditional repairs. Not always, it does depend on the circumstance, but they're usually considerably cheaper. Okay, so we just crossed the street curb. And right here I'm getting a pretty good locate. So it's right here at we're sitting about 2 feet or so back from the curb. We're almost right underneath a rose bush. And also I noticed that, almost directly on top of where I'm locating right now, right in front of this particular rose bush, there is a good sized hole that's forming. Anytime I see holes like that almost directly on top of the sewer line, it's not always a 100% indicator, but sewer lines with bad pipe joints, they suck dirt through them. It is a fact. Anytime you see on the news that there was a bus or a car swallowed by a sinkhole in the street, it is almost always the result of either a city sewer main lateral or storm system that is bad, and it's sucking all the dirt and road bed out from underneath the street. So I'm not saying you're going to have a sinkhole here big enough to swallow a bus. I'm just saying it is something that does indeed happen. It causes hydro erosion. So, or the other thing that can indicate is you've got, potentially rats weaseling their way down into there. But those joints like that are separated at the top. Again, my camera is upside down. The bottom of the screen right now is the top of the pipe. Where you have those big separations at the top of the sewer line, they are indeed capable of pulling groundwater and dirt in. It doesn't happen all year. Usually you see a lot of that stuff during the rainy season. You get really heavy water saturation in the ground, which also creates a lot of hydraulic pressure. Not every one of these joints is just gaping wide open. Sometimes it does require some hydraulic pressure to force stuff through the joints. Now we're getting back into the root intruded locations here. And the top of the pipe there, again, which is at the bottom of the screen right now, you can see the dirt staining. All that brown splotchy stuff there on the pipe wall, that's dirt that's seeping through and getting stuck to the top of the pipe. Thus far, good slope and grade. You, I think, are going to have something here you can hopefully do a trenchless repair on. Okay, so right now we're at the top of the yard in the grass. We're just a few feet away. We're probably sitting about 12, maybe 15 feet out from the edge of the porch right now. I'm getting around 9 feet there. I did get a couple locates that jumped down to around 7'8", but I think those are kind of some interference related because most of them were coming in deeper than that. So you got a couple spots right here with some really minor standing water. I don't think that's going to hinder you from being able to do a epoxy liner on this thing. Realistically, I think you're going to be okay there. All right, I got to push through past this transition all the way. This locate might be off by a foot or so. If I try and locate right on the seam between cast and clay, I'll get a really weird locate the way the signal comes through that. Okay, so straight out from the front door, which again I think is on, as you stare kind of at the garage area, the right side of the house. It just feels like it makes more sense to orient from that direction to me for some reason. Anyway, we're sitting under the hedgerow that's, smack dab underneath it right now. It's kind of a hard spot to get the locator through. But right there, I'm getting about 7 foot 6 inches. Right at the top of the yard, about 4 feet beyond the edge of the yard, where the yard kind of meets the bark dust, go in that direction, 4 feet. Right as the line starts to dive down, I'm getting 9 feet at its deepest. But again, some of these locates are coming in a little bit bouncy. But considering how much the yard is built up above street level, it would make sense in this circumstance to have a deeper depth up in the yard here than it would down the road, which it's often the opposite of that when you have a flatter property. So either way, as long as you don't have to dig for any reason, the depth of that really doesn't matter if you're doing a liner. That's mostly in the event something goes awry during that process that requires digging up. You know, if a air machine loses pressure, something happens with the liner, a piece of equipment breaks off, that's why those guys want to know those depths and where things are located at. Oh, and bear with me, sorry. I need to push back out here and get a... And so my closest locate to the street curb was about 88 feet. Considering where I was situated there relative to the curb is right around 90 to 91 feet. We'll call it 91 feet to be on the safe side. But from here at about 56 feet to 91 feet, that is, I recommend all the clay pipe be updated. When you do these liners, make sure you talk to the repair guys. It shouldn't cost anything extra. Take that liner just beyond the street curb. Take it a foot or two past the curb. The face of the curb is where city responsibility takes over. The worst thing in the world is taking an update. I mean, as far as sewers go, it's the worst thing in the world in Portland anyway. If you stop that update smack dab at the face of the curb, I will tell you right now, you are just asking for a root intrusion. Those transition joints are by far the weakest joint in your sewer line to roots. That's where all the roses and trees and everything get planted, are right on that curb strip. When you get a root intrusion to one of those transitions, the city will make it your problem every single time if you do it right on the dividing line. So you want to extend that liner a foot or so past the curb. That way, if a root ever does come through, it is undoubtedly doing it in city territory, and it can be someone else's problem other than your own. And it really doesn't add any cost on the repair at all, extending that liner by a foot. All right, I had to pull the camera back a little bit to get a better locate. Right here, directly underneath this spot, where it looks like they built the dang fireplace on top of the cleanout, unfortunately. It's so close to where the back wall of the fireplace is, I can't tell what's on the other side of that, but if that is the foundation wall, if you were to walk through that wall there and be outside, it makes sense where the cleanout is at. Unfortunately, there's a fireplace there. So I took a couple pictures, one as my camera was sitting underneath that spot, which is basically right up against the back wall of the fireplace. I pulled back a couple, like about a foot and a half, and got a better locate, and also did a picture there. You'll see my spray paint can just sitting on the ground. The direction it's oriented is the way the line is running. And my best locate there was right before you go under the fireplace. Just in front of it, I'm getting about 1 foot 9 inches deep there. So in the event they're not able to get a liner system, the rope or what have you, push rod, there's a few different ways of doing it through the toilet flange here. There's enough bends and Ys that it may not work. That's the one spot there you may actually have to do some digging to add a clean out in. And realistically, this house could use one. It needs some access. It has zero clean out access right now. So that would be a really good spot to put a two-way clean out. Ideally, it's two-way. That way you can service backwards under the floor. One-way cleanouts are my nightmare, honestly, but they are much more convenient for running equipment through because of the sweep on them. It's a much gentler bend to push equipment through, but it limits what you can service. Either way, it'd be a good spot to put a cleanout. And sometimes you also have the option of installing one just in front of the clay pipe out in the yard area, but you're going to be digging a 7, 8, 9 foot deep hole to do it. I think busting up the tile down here a little bit to put an access point in, honestly, I think makes more sense. And you realistically also that if you put a clean out in there, it's not going to let you service every inch of this thing. It's going to let you see the main trunk line or portions of it. You go through a few different Y connections between here and getting out of the house, so it's not going to allow access to all of everything, but it will give you decent access. But when you go backwards through something like that, your camera or whatever is going to take different bends than you are going away from it. So anyway, that's really not the biggest concern. The biggest thing here is just giving an access point to do a liner if you choose to do so. That's how I'd be doing if it were me. However it's done, whether you dig it, burst it, sleeve it, I recommend it be all clay pipe on property be fully updated. I would again take that repair just beyond the street curb, especially if you go the liner route. If you dig, that's a different animal sometimes. Sometimes you're having to crack into the curb in the street, which will indeed add cost onto things in some cases. Sorry, this dang toilet valve down here is not turning off all the way and it's leaking. I'm trying to mop that up here before it streams too far out of here. As for the cast iron under the floor, you've got a couple spots with some low points. I mean, we're talking 1/16 of an inch. I don't even know if it hits a 1/4 inch at its worst point. You've got a couple areas with some super minor bellies. Those I'm not concerned about. There's zero buildup in them. They're clean. You still want to keep an eye on things though. It's older cast iron. Nothing lasts for forever. Sometimes standing water, in some circumstances can cause cast iron, whether it's minor standing water or not, to wear out a little faster in those locations, especially in situations where you've got, let's say, a couple of parents raising 3 teenage girls, but, mom and 3 girls have really long hair, and the drains are clogging up all the time because of hair, and dad, comes in and likes to clear the clogs out with Drano. Drano is an acid, and when you put acidic stuff down lines, it can get that acid can get hung up temporarily in bellies because of the standing water there. It allows that stuff to sit and eat at the pipe more so than if it were flowing off completely. So that's what I mean. It's not at a point right now where it's advanced wear or anything like that, but it's worth keeping an eye on periodically. I would re-scope out every 2 years or so just to monitor the condition of the cast iron. Even every 3 would be okay. It's not at a point right now where I'm worried about that stuff wearing out all of a sudden. It's got life in it. But just like the outside pipe, because it's 4-inch cast iron, you also have the option of doing epoxy liners on that. And that way you can pick and choose. If you're here long enough to see that stuff updated, it allows you to potentially take advantage of that too. You just got to keep up with keeping an eye on it so you don't let your line completely wear out. As it sits right now, we have good flow through all the cast iron. It's very clean. Standing water is doing almost nothing to affect functionality. The outside portion of the line has good slope and grade still, almost no standing water at all, which makes it a good candidate for a liner. After any repairs are done, I recommend a rescope. Whether you do a liner or a traditional repair. If you do traditional repairs, you got to make sure you're doing your rescope after the trench is closed. If you have to go trench up the sidewalk or something like that, you got to bury the sewer line, get everything ready to pour concrete. That way there's weight on top of the sewer line. It's got a big load on top of it so that when you rescope it, that way you can catch any settling problems that may occur before you completely button everything back up again. And put sod back down and everything. It's worth doing. If you scope this with a trench that's open, everything you're looking at's in theory at that point. So it's important to rescope at the proper time. And then if you do a liner, still worth rescoping to make sure all the epoxy cured up properly and you don't have any big chunks of epoxy sitting in the flow line.